Making an awesome clap in a DAW is a lot trickier than just turning up the volume knob. My electronic music teacher at Howard University, HU, he described mixing in the box as trying to get things through a door. And there's only so many things that can go through the same door at any given time. So if you're trying to fit a lot through the door, then you either have to kind of shape things a certain way so that they fit, or stagger them so that you can get multiple things through the door in a short amount of time. So because we're limited in how much can get through that door at any given point, we have to be strategic about using small techniques to shave those things down like a big clap so that it can fit. Basically, what we're doing is creating the illusion of a big clap to our ears. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. The first thing is obviously gain or volume, right? So how loud the sound actually is. If you can't hear your clap in your mix, you can turn it up. Volume does have limitations though, right? So there is a ceiling and things will start peaking if you turn things up just with volume too loud. A great way to make sure that you're doing this accurately and getting a real picture of how loud your clap actually is in terms of the volume is mix in mono. I have another video on that, but just mix in mono because that gives you a much clearer and true picture of how loud things actually are than mixing in stereo. The stereo field can lie to you in all kinds of ways, and if you have ever taken your music to the car and it sounds completely different, or on the phone and it sounds completely different, then it's probably because you didn't spend enough time mixing in mono. The best way, in my opinion, to make sure that you have things as loud as they can be, but without peaking, is have something like either a limiter on that clap track so that you know that it's not going to go over, and also just make sure that you're not hitting that limiter too hard. We want to have just a little bit taken off the top to make sure that it's not busting through the ceiling, but we don't want to chop off the top of the mountain. The next way that we can make our clap sound bigger is by using overdubs. And the reason overdubs make things sound louder is because, just like we talked about with the door, we can't get too big of a clap to go through the door at one time, but we can get two claps, or a clap and two smaller claps to go in very close right behind each other. And that's going to make it sound bigger without it being too big to get through the door. Next time you're recording a clap, record a clap on a loop and just let it go around a couple times and just keep clapping as best as you can to the rhythm that you want. And those little imperfections in between the takes, if you slice those up and put them on top of each other, are going to give you a much fatter clap than just one clap by itself. Even if you're not recording claps, if you have a couple different clap samples, just stagger them a little bit with the way that you place the notes in the timeline, and that'll give you a much bigger sound as well. The next thing on our list here that we can do is use of reverb and delay effects. Reverb I like to think of as a way to put that clap in a space, and delay is more of an effect that I use to have that just last a little bit longer after the original instance of the hit. Even though reverb can have the effect of making something sound further away, it also can have the effect of making it sound bigger, because if something is loud, even though it's far away, then that tricks you into thinking, wow, this must be really loud if I can hear it like this and it feels far away.
Always in moderation.
With reverb though, be careful, it's easy to overdo. So just put enough that we can notice it, but not enough that it takes over the original sound. Also, Reason has an amazing device called the Echo that has a ducking feature so that it will stop the effect of the delay while the clap is happening. So every time it claps, it'll stop the effect if you turn the ducking all the way up to 100. And you can play with it and see how far you like things to be ducked, but it's an amazing functionality and one that really has helped me make some pretty epic sounding claps. Now, we talked about the way that reverb can make things sound further away, but there's other effects that can do that as well. One of them is EQ. When we're really close to a sound, we have a tendency to be able to hear all of it. So when we start taking away the bottom or the top, it gives the impression that we are not as close to it. So for example, you might not be able to hear the high end of a band when they are in another room. So rolling off some of that is going to give the impression that things are further away. Just like also you might not be able to hear the low end of something if it's far away. Rolling off will also give that impression. One trick that they do often in studio work is they roll high end off of pretty much everything else except the lead vocal, so that the lead vocal sounds closer to the listener. And this is the same kind of thing that we can do with a clap. The next in the line of spatial plugins, ones that control the way that we perceive how far away a sound is, would be compression. Compression basically is a volume knob on your sound. It can make it quieter at the beginning of the sound, at the end of the sound, depending on how you set it up. And the effect of putting a clamp on that volume on the front end of the sound makes it sound further away. But if you put the clamp on the back end of the sound, it makes it sound like it's closer to you. So whatever kind of compressor that you use, what you want to do if you want the sound to sound closer to you is you want to have a slower attack. So the device doesn't grab the front end of the sound, it grabs the back. And if you want it to sound further away, then you have the attack hit the front. So it's a faster attack. Where compression, reverb, and volume kind of trick the ear into feeling that something is closer or further away, what saturation does is it makes us feel like something is more important and makes it feel bigger. It also has the added benefit of lessening the overall volume. So you can get a fatter sounding version of your sound with saturation, and it's quieter. Don't take my word for it. Just slap a saturation plugin on one of your drums and turn it up. It immediately is going to sound louder and more present in your mix. It's going to sound bigger, but if you overdo it, then it sounds distorted. That's basically what's happening when you hear a guitar distortion pedal. It's saturation that has reached a point where the breaking of the audio is audible. I find that you can usually get what you need out of saturation long before you get to the point where it's like audibly distorted. The last method that I recommend to getting your clap to really pop in your mix and sound huge is called side chaining. In this particular way that I'm going to describe it though, I would liken it more to ducking than side chaining. The reason I say that is instead of making our clap louder, we've done that in a lot of ways so far, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to make everything else quieter. And that's ducking, at least in the video side, that's what they would call it. Now, the secret to doing this without giving away that you're doing it is to only duck those frequencies that you need to make the clap just cut through the mix. For example, I might send everything else to a bus and sidechain just 5K, like a little notch at 5K, 3 to 6 decibels, or 1K, somewhere in that range. By doing that, that's the equivalent of me adding 3 to 6 dB to my clap just on the volume fader. The only difference is when I'm doing it with side chaining, I'm dropping everybody else's volume in that specific frequency range for just a quick millisecond to let the attack of the clap get through my mix, and then the mix comes back. If you do it the right way and don't overdo it, then nobody except experienced sound engineers will be able to even know that it's going on. All they'll know is that there's a really ridiculously loud smack in your face clap. I'm a Reason user, so what I like to do is send all of my kind of auxiliary instruments to a channel that I call ducking, and then I side chain out for the kick, for the vocal, and for the snare or the clap, so that I can make sure all of those three elements really speak when it's time for them to be heard. Everything else just kind of sits there below that, and every time is needed in whatever frequency range, whoop, you just take a little bit out, and that makes so big of a difference when you're talking about a track with a lot of instruments. Thanks for hanging in here with me. I know there's a lot of mixing stuff in here, maybe more than you were expecting just on the tutorial about making a big clap, but that's how it's done. It's not all just one shot. There's no magic silver bullet. It's a bunch of little things that we add up together that over the course of just a decibel here, decibel here, decibel there, gives us that loudness that is perceived that doesn't blow our mix technically. And take my word for it, understanding all these principles that I just went over is a necessary thing, even just as a mixing engineer, because if you have a crappy mix, you're going to have a crappy master. This is not stuff that can be fixed on the mastering side. And I don't want you to have the same experiences that I've had where I've mixed something that sounds the way that I want it to, only for it to be decapitated in the master later on and not sound anything like itself. Still hanging around? You look like you could use a mug or a t-shirt. If so, go over to samuelprather.com and grab yourself one. I'm a married father of 4, so I promise you the money will be well spent. Did you learn something today? If you did, then hit the like and subscribe, hit the bell so you know when I'm coming out with new videos. Also, if you're an experienced producer and you use these techniques, go ahead and post, what you've done and the way that you use these tools to get the most out of your claps and percussive sounds in your mixes. I'm Samuel Prather. I hope I gave you a reason to create.